World War II was a worldwide war that was fought between the Allied powers and Axis powers lasting from 1939 to 1945. War broke out between these countries because Adolf Hitler had a motive to essentially take over the world and began invading places in Europe, such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, and many others. He and his Nazi army executed millions of Jews in Germany and in more countries to create a larger and more unified German nation. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, that is when the United States was forced to fight back in the war. The Allies were the United States of America, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, France, and China. The Axis were Germany, Japan, and Italy. After many battles and victories by the Allies, Germany surrendered on May 7, 1945.
The role of women is reinforced by popular American culture. Because of the need for men in the military during World War II, most women had to step up and fill in jobs on the home front. Some examples of the jobs were considered non-warrior roles, such as factory workers, mothers, nurses, and peace activists. Women were not seen as soldiers because soldier was synonymous with male. This was troublesome for women because even though they could have been used on the battlefront, they were forced to stay at home. Although women's roles were mostly on the home front, there were still women in the military. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a Russian super sniper and killed 309 Germans. She was invited to Washington by the United States for her impressive kill record. Rather than focusing on her accomplishment, the American press focused on her physical feminine appearance.
Women's roles also consisted of voluntary military and non-military roles, such as the Red Cross. The International Red Cross's main function during World War II was to provide hospital, recreation, and welfare services in times of war to members of the armed services. The International Red Cross is made up of 3 organizations: national societies, the League of Red Cross Societies, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. National societies are national Red Cross societies recognized by a given country's government and the International Committee of the Red Cross. The National Society for the United States is the American National Red Cross Corporation. The main purpose of the American National Red Cross is to provide volunteer assistance to sick and injured members of armies during wartime. Other objectives include assisting U.S. military forces and other countries to give volunteer relief to suffering caused by calamities, and to act as a medium of communication between civilians of the United States and their military. The Act of 1905 stated that American Red Cross membership shall be open to all people of the United States, paving the way for women to join the volunteer effort in World War II.
One volunteer of the American Red Cross during World War II was Jeanne Severance. She was born on September 2, 1918, in New York. She joined the American Red Cross in 1945. She was first stationed in France and then transferred to Calcutta and Assam, India. Some of her letters had strips cut out of them because of censorship. Some events she wrote about were not allowed to be shared. Most of her days were spent riding in a clubmobile, handing out coffee and donuts to the soldiers. Her feelings towards the war were strong. She said, "The whole damned war is a horrible waste of lives." Jeanne wanted to do more than just serve coffee and donuts to men.
Jeanne engaged in an entirely new culture with new challenges to face. For both the service members and the American National Red Cross workers stationed in India, war zones and hospitals, diseases and harsh conditions plagued the camps, including excessive heat. All personnel were instructed to take a preventative tablet for cerebral malaria. While infections such as measles and leprosy were still very prevalent, black soldiers caught malaria most frequently, which contributed to the segregation and racial tensions felt within the military. We serve more colored men than we do white. It has been hard sometimes to treat them as we do everyone else, but the fact remains the Red Cross is an international organization, and color has nothing to do with it. To have a broader effect on the conditions than African American soldiers were native Indian women, because soldiers would bring back and hide Indian prostitutes and young women in camps. It's not uncommon for enlisted men to drive to a nearby town, purchase an Indian girl for the equivalent of $3, and sneak her back into a basha back in the woods adjacent to camp. And even witness male soldiers swiping blankets and food for the girls while they hid from others. These women were perceived as disease-ridden and filthy. The soldiers would resort to these Indian natives due to rejections by nurses and Red Cross volunteers to court and comfort them. Despite the soldiers' many attempts, Jeanne, however, still managed to be productive while stationed in India, as she was named the Dean of Women for the Armed Forces educational program and took over a typing class, while she was an acting Red Cross volunteer also. Also, during this time, the news was relayed to American forces in India of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fatal stroke and Harry Truman's succession of office.
During Jeanne's letters, she often made numerous accounts on how the males of the military viewed women. More often than not, the women of camps were seen as glamour girls, but in reality, there were very few times when they had a chance or even wanted to have a night out with themselves. Jeanne said they did not bear any resemblance to the glamorous type, and they rarely indulged in more than 2 beers in the evening. This shows that the men of the camps believed women should have been engaging in their role of getting drunk in the evenings while making sure that they bring home another man with them. Jeanne was disgusted with the views that the men held because that was not the type of woman she was at all. What is ironic about this is that at one point, Jeanne referenced that she did like to enjoy a night off while being a woman. Once in a while, I dash home from work at night, slip into my gownless evening straps, trip off with some handsome fellow to Hump Happy, where I spend the remainder of the evening being a woman again. Till my evening sandals wear out, I can continue to throw my femininity around for a while. Although she does not like the way women are viewed during this time, she also seems to contradict herself because she does like being able to go out with the men while going to so-called Hump Happy. This shows that she does like to flaunt the fact that she is a woman and likes to be able to do whatever she pleases. One could see that times were tough for many people during the time of war. Jeanne mentioned how she remembered a time during college in Columbia that peace was such a rare quality to achieve. She only realized this because she asked herself how many times she experienced peace, but that she rarely ever experienced it at all. This connects to the times during war because war is rarely ever a time of peace, but ironically, that is what the war is trying to achieve. She noticed this because Gandhi played a big role during the protests of the time, and that he was the leading proponent of the pacifist resistance in India.
Jeanne spent her time in China seeing countless locals who were struck with disease. There was one poor creature there with a horrible-looking foot. These natives go out in the rice paddies knee-deep in muck, and leech fastens themselves on an available spot. After removing it, instead of caring for the little sore spot, back they go to the more muck. It begins to look like an ugly sore. Before they know it, they're victims of jungle rot. That was what was wrong with this Burmese coolie. Half his foot had been eaten away. Maggots were crawling all over the awfulest pus infection I've ever seen. The poison had begun to circulate through his system. He was gaunt, stooped over, and a pale, pasty color. He's probably dead now. Archived letters show that it is important to note how much suffering the people of China endured after World War II. Considering the area was extremely impoverished, the people were struck with famine and illness. Near the end of the war, Jeanne needed an escape in order to further digest her experience. With this being said, shortly after being sent home, she went to Mexico. Here, she somewhat escaped a love of the war. This is where her letters from the war stop and her account of wartime ended.
By understanding the time period and circumstances surrounding Jeanne's letters, we can gain a deeper meaning from her experiences and apply them to others during wartime. Her letters serve as a window into the typical daily life of an American Red Cross worker during World War II, describing the harsh conditions and hectic landscapes. Jeanne spent time serving as an aide in France, India, and China, providing different takes on how each region treated soldiers and Red Cross volunteers alike. With stories available from people like Jeanne, we are able to put into context the great impact these women had throughout World War II. The strides made by women during World War II shaped the opportunities that they possess today, with a more equal hiring system and better careers. Without these ambitious women, society may still look very similar to the gender roles established before the war, with a huge disparity in life and quality for men and women. While there are still efforts that can be made towards total equality, women today can look back on historical figures such as Jeanne for how to make a difference.